Good morning, everyone. This is episode 4 of the Happy-ology podcast with me, Dr. Charlotte McFarlane. And today's topic is letting go. Yesterday we talked about being present, and we talked about how, oftentimes we're either living too far out in the future or too far in the past. We're thinking about our future expectations, whether they're good or bad, or we're thinking about our past regrets, whether it's something that we wish we hadn't done or hadn't happened, or if it's just something that we missed from the past. And I wanted to talk deep dive a little bit more into letting go of the past. We're also going to talk a little bit about letting go of these expectations with the ultimate purpose of becoming more present, of living more in the now. I had this discussion with a client, or the coaching client, the other day, about letting go, and we had set a goal of easily releasing the past, and that was my suggestion. She said, "I feel really uncomfortable," and we were talking about some losses. And she said, I don't want to forget. I don't want to not have the memories of these people in the past. And I think there's a really clear distinction to be made between releasing our thoughts and forgetting. They're not the same. And actually, I think forgetting isn't healthy. Forgetting to me is, we talk about happiness blocks, and we talk about them getting stuck in the energy field because we've ignored them, we've pushed them away, we've decided that, we can't handle them at all, and we want to just kind of squish them up in a ball and forget about them and never acknowledge that experience. Whereas releasing is releasing the ties, releasing all of these, extra thoughts that keep bringing us back there, that are pulling us out of the present. And I don't ever want anybody to forget anything, but I want, when we release, we still remember, we still can pull up all of those memories, but they're not as, we don't get caught up in them the same way. And the way that you release something as opposed to forgetting is you have to acknowledge it. When we're talking about releasing, we're talking about acknowledging everything, all of the feelings, including loss. So I don't want to share too much, but we're talking about the loss of some dear family members. And my client said, I don't want to forget them. I don't ever want to not have them be in my heart. And what was keeping her from actually releasing and moving forward was these feelings of loss that she was still plagued with. And when we live in the now, this really great thing happens where we don't focus as much on the things that we had or the things that we're going to have. And all of our joy is derived in the moment. And there's sort of, I always hesitate to say the joy is never going to be as much as if we had like a really fantastic high point when we start living in the now. Because every moment just becomes content. We never hit these big periods of overjoy. And we don't hit these really big emotional swings. Instead, we kind of, we sort of level out. And we have little ups and downs, little up and down swings, but it's not the really big, crazy shifts where, you're high as a cloud one day, but the next day you are lower than dirt. It gets replaced by this really, I still call it joy. And it's this really kind of wholesome, organic joy that is internal as opposed to external. And it really is so much more satisfying than these, big kind of bursts of joy that are typically external and that come, they come on you fast and they leave you fast sort of thing. And when you hit these periods of overjoy and then these periods of real lowness, you always end up with fear. There's always this fear when you're happy. And let me know if you've experienced this, because I bet everybody has. When you're really happy, you end up in fear because you think it's going to go away. And as you learn to become more present and as you learn to experience this more internal joy, you don't have the fear component because you know that the joy will always be there. And so when we talk about releasing versus forgetting, to me, forgetting is, people are afraid of forgetting. And I think that's understandable, especially when we're talking about like this example, the loss of a loved one that brought us so much joy. When things in the past have brought us so much joy and excitement and happiness and love, we become very attached to that, reasonably so, because those are all fantastic emotions that we all want to have more of in our life. And we feel that when we lose a person who provided love and joy for us, that we are going to lose that love and joy. And this goes back to the idea of external versus internal. So the external gives us those really big swings, but the internal is just kind of little swings. It's just this constant joy. And the external, because things can be lost, we always have this fear, and the fear always clouds those highs. And so when we talk about forgetting and people are afraid to forget, it's that fear coming out. It's that fear saying, hey, all of this great stuff was external. And if all of this great stuff was external and I lose it, when I lose it, I'm going to end up in one of these lower than dirt swings. And it's going to be terrible. And so people cling to the things that used to make them happy. But, you can see where it makes sense. You can see where people say, oh, well, this used to make me happy, so if I still hang on to it and I still, hold it tight, then I'm never going to lose it and I'm always going to be happy. But the truth is we can't control what's going on externally, and we do experience loss. We experience loss every day. Sometimes it's minor and we don't even really think about it. It's just the loss of loss of another day, but sometimes it's a big loss, like losing a loved one. And when we lose a loved one that we've tried so hard to hang on to, all of a sudden we're faced with all of this pain, all of this fear, plus the loss of our external support, the external emotions that were coming in. And the shift, I think, that really needs to happen is we need to recognize that it never was the external thing that created the emotion within us. All emotion gets created internally. Everything that we feel is created internally. Now, people will trigger in us certain emotions. A loved one giving us love, I mean, that's going to fill us up and really make us feel whole and loved and worthy. But the emotion is still generated internally. And if we accept that all of our feelings are generated internally, it means that changes in the external can't affect us. Certainly not in the same way. We talk about you're in the present, you're in yourself, but you are always aware of what's going on externally, but they don't have to, changes in the external world do not have to affect your internal state. And so when we're talking about, and then to bring it back to forgetting versus releasing, people are afraid to forget because forgetting is an external thing. To me, it's very much an external thing. It's saying I used to have this person and now I don't. And when we say, I don't want to forget, we're still trying to hold on to this memory of this other person. With releasing releases the tie and the dependency that we had on this external person or external the thing, whatever it is that we're trying to release this tie to. And we're releasing our, if you want to say we're releasing our dependency on the external thing for driving our emotional state, or if we're releasing our just our belief that this thing is affecting our internal state or our internal emotions. Really when we say release, we're allowing ourselves to become more in touch with our internal, more in touch with the present, more in touch with our, get in the now, our authentic self. The more that we can release everything, the more internal, the more, the more internally generated joy we feel, and the much less fear. And in fact, when you release all of your ties to the external world, and I want to be really careful about how I'm saying this, but when you release all of when you become very internal, very authentic, and you're sitting in your seat of the soul or your throne, and things are going on externally around you that you're aware of, but they're not affecting your emotional state, you actually lose the fear, because nothing can change you if you release your ties to the external or release the ability of the external to affect your emotions. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about releasing and moving forward. And so, back to the little, the coaching example, when we remember, I don't want to say that, when we are worried about forgetting a loved one, we're worried about losing the external emotion. And we're worried that when we forget, we will lose, the joy and the love. All of those good things that the relationship brought us. And we cling, we kind of wrap it up tight and we hold it to us as tight as we can. And when we do this, we just generate all of this fear in ourselves. So the advice, of course, is to release, and we release our ties to the past. And what's great is you still remember, but you lose the fear of losing or of loss. And then you are able to sit more in your now and to move forward with your life, as opposed to always trying to cling so desperately to this past. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of it's a tricky topic. It's a very fine distinction. And really, of course, we've all experienced loss in our lives. And this is where things like, when we release the past, that's when we can start to be grateful for what we had, and sort of get this awareness of that was then, and this was, that was then, but this is now, and all is well. We just really experience that gratefulness for what we had, and we can be very grateful about the emotions that they opened up within us. But as we release, we start to see those emotions are still there. Those feelings, the support that we felt, it's still there. And it's internal, and we start to get more and more onto this, into that steady state, as opposed to that, really up and down, volatile state with the external. And to do this, we always talk about walking through, we have to walk through the fear and the emotions. And the best way to release is to accept. And we'll unpack that one in the future. But what I would say is especially if, and this is a lot of what I do in the coaching, is if there's a past thing that keeps coming up, or that you are aware of yourself clinging to, that's a fantastic first step. I would say, take some time and really look deeply into the thing that you keep remembering. And so then, let me see if I can think of a personal example. I'm someone who has had a lot of anxiety, and who, at one point in my life, luckily I have these tools, but for a very long time, I would replay scenes from the past over and over and over again. And I would always try to push them out. I would always try to forget them. But they would keep coming up and keep coming up and keep coming up. And the way that I was finally able to release these things is by looking into them. And it's what we talked about the other day, where we sit, we sit in our seat of the soul, and we become an observer. And and we become, I'm just writing it down here, but it's not the letters aren't coming for me. But where, where we start looking deep and we can sit outside of the thoughts and observe the thoughts and watch them and see where they go, and start asking, what did I feel? What were the feeling words? And even so far as, what was the lesson? How did that affect me going forward? Was there something that I learned then that, or was there a false belief that I learned then that I continue to carry into today? Or, is there something that maybe I should have done? I hate to use the word should, because you always do exactly what you're supposed to do. But if I were to go back, is there something I would have done differently? And, what can I learn from this going forward? How can I incorporate the lesson, whatever it was there? How can I incorporate that into my future self? And when you can look deep and observe the event, whatever it is that maybe you want to forget, but you can't, or if it's something, where you don't want to forget, but you're so worried about forgetting that it's causing some, it's continuing to cause a lot of grief and anxiety and fear for you. You look back and you say, what did I learn? And how is that person, or how is that experience still with me today? And we can pick apart and say, what are the good things? What are the bad things? And hold on to the very best of it. And I don't mean hold on like clinging, but I mean integrate into ourself the lessons that we had, and then become grateful for being able to have that experience, for being able to have those lessons. Become grateful, and actually, when you do that, these things tend to release, and we can release a lot of weight. We can release, a lot of muscle tension. Even we can release things in the physical body that are being affected by the energy field. We can release so much just by doing this look deep and understanding that, sometimes we cling, and sometimes there's a lot of fear. And there's fear about facing things that we're not proud of. There's fear about losing things that we loved. And that never happens. It doesn't happen. We will always remember. We will never lose because we had. And that's a whole other statement to unpack, I think. But yeah, I mean, basically, if we had something, even just for a short time, we remember it, and then we always have it. We always have the best of it that we are willing to keep and integrate into our best selves, while we, can be grateful and release all of the negative stuff, and release all of the ties that are holding us back, so that we can live more in our present. All right, lots to chew on there. I think, so we're going to talk about having and losing and never losing in the future, I think, here. And a few other topics to come up and keep unpacking. But we're only on episode 4, so there's lots to go. And I want to say thank you again for being here with me as we embark on this new journey. Check us out at the Happy-ology Facebook page or at happy-ology.com. And I will see you tomorrow for episode 5. Thank you so much, everybody.